He thought being single was a punishment. He didn't choose it, not at first. It chose him. After the divorce, after the breakups, after the long silences that followed, he found himself alone. No texts in the morning. No one is waiting at home. No arguments. No affection. Just quiet. At first it felt like failure, because society tells men, if you're alone, you did something wrong. You couldn't keep her. You weren't enough. You lost. But then something unexpected happened. The quiet stopped hurting. The stillness became sacred. And for the first time in his life, he started hearing something he'd never truly heard before, his voice. So if you're a man who's walking alone right now, not because you hate love, but because you need space to understand yourself, stay with me, because what follows is not an instruction manual. It's a mirror, a map, a message for every man who thought being single meant being broken, when in truth, it might be the very beginning of becoming whole. Most men are raised to believe that partnership is the goal, that until you have a woman, you are incomplete, that marriage is the milestone, and family is your definition. And so we run, we pursue, we chase, we offer, we adapt. We become what we think she wants, sometimes at the cost of who we are. The truth is, many men enter relationships half-formed, not because they're weak, but because no one taught them how to sit with themselves, to be enough for themselves. We were told to build careers, to be protectors, providers, problem solvers, but no one ever said, you need to know your soul before you give your heart. So we loved, as a way to feel valuable. We partnered to prove our worth. We married to fulfill expectations, not to express alignment. And in that rush to become someone's man, we forgot to become our own. It starts early. Boys are taught to succeed, to lead, to provide, to win, but rarely are they taught how to grieve, how to self-reflect, how to sit in silence without needing someone to validate their presence. So the boy grows into a man who is praised for his usefulness, but starved for his own identity. He becomes a master at fixing things around him, while never being taught how to fix what's inside him. And when did he enter love? He often enters with one deep, hidden hope. Maybe she will make me feel complete. But no woman, matter how kind, how loyal, how loving, can give a man what he hasn't yet given himself. No relationship can carry the weight of healing a man who hasn't yet looked inward. So he shows up strong on the outside, but confused on the inside. He gives, he sacrifices, he bends, and slowly, silently, he disappears. Not because she asked him to, but he never learned how to stay grounded in himself while loving someone else. That's the lie so many men inherit, that being a good man means putting her first, always, even if it costs you your voice, even if it means slowly becoming a stranger to yourself. But true love doesn't ask you to vanish. It invites you to show up fully, as a whole man, with depth, with boundaries, with clarity. Because until you become your own man, you'll keep looking for a woman to permit you to be one. And that is the root of so much silent suffering. But it's also where freedom begins, when a man stops searching for completion in her and starts discovering it in himself. Note, Part 2. What solitude teaches a man. When a man finds himself single, especially after 40 or 50, there's a different kind of silence. It's not the loud loneliness of youth, not the noise of parties missed, or the sting of no one texting back. It's quieter than that, heavier than that, more revealing than that. It's the steady, echoing question that sits with him in the mornings. Who am I without her? And that's where the real work begins. Because solitude is not a sentence. It's a classroom. It doesn't shame you. It teaches you, not with words, but with the stillness between them. When a man is alone, truly alone, the masks start to fall. He no longer needs to say the right thing. He no longer performs for comfort. He no longer rearranges himself to fit into someone else's vision. And in that space, something incredible happens. He meets himself, maybe for the first time. He starts noticing things he never paid attention to before. The way he likes his coffee. How long does he want to sleep in? What music makes him feel alive? Not just what she used to play with in the kitchen. He realizes some of the hobbies he picked up weren't his. They were hers, or theirs, or something he adopted to stay connected. And now, left with just himself, He learns what he enjoys, not what made her happy, not what his parents expected, not what society applauds, but what brings him a quiet, personal sense of joy. Maybe it's woodworking, maybe it's writing, maybe it's walking every morning, alone, under the rising sun. He discovers that silence isn't emptiness, it's clarity, that not having to explain his feelings every night isn't loneliness, it's peace. Solitude strips away the noise, the pressure, the roles he thought he had to play, and beneath it all, he finds something sacred, his breath, his rhythm, his boundaries, his values. He no longer compromises to avoid conflict. He no longer explains away his instincts. He no longer trades peace for partnership, because solitude teaches a man the difference between being alone and being at home with himself. And here's the deepest truth. If you don't know peace on your own, you will chase chaos in someone else. You will call it passion. You will call it connection. You will confuse adrenaline for love and tension for depth. But when you've tasted real peace, the kind that comes from within, you stop mistaking friction for fire. Solitude sharpens your vision. It refines your soul. It resets your compass, so that the next time love knocks, you'll open the door not from need, but from knowing. And that changes everything. Men who fear being alone often rush into love, not because they're ready, but because they can't bear the silence. They meet someone. She's beautiful, charismatic, affectionate, and more than anything, she's present. She fills the silence. She brings energy, excitement, and a sense of escape. She makes the loneliness disappear, at least for a while. And to a man who hasn't healed, that feels like rescue. But most rescues, especially emotional ones, come with a price. Because what he's doing is postponing the inevitable. The wounds he hasn't addressed, the patterns he hasn't broken, the insecurities still whispering, "You're only worthy if someone chooses you," and stays. So the relationship begins, but it's not a meeting of two whole people. It's a transaction. One offers comfort, the other offers validation, and beneath it all is fear. Fear of being abandoned, fear of being unseen, fear of not mattering. And from that fear comes distortion. He stops being fully himself. He shapes his words to keep her happy. He says yes when he means no. He hides his needs, because asking feels like a risk. He molds. He adjusts. He performs. Not out of love, but out of fear that if she ever sees the real him, she'll walk away. And that's not love. That's self-abandonment. It doesn't feel like it at first, because in the beginning, there's laughter, connection, affection, but underneath it all is imbalance. One person trying to hold up both sides of the bridge, and eventually, it collapses. She begins to feel the weight of his need, and he begins to resent her for not fixing his emptiness. Neither of them meant for it to go that way. But that's what happens when we love without wholeness. When we use romance to hide from ourselves, instead of showing up fully, already knowing who we are. Because here's the truth. Two halves don't make a whole. They make a dependency. And dependency, no matter how passionate, always turns into pressure. Real love doesn't ask you to disappear. It invites you to stay present, fully you. Real love doesn't begin with need. It begins with choice. Two people whole on their own, choosing to build something that neither could have built alone. A relationship that's not about rescue or validation or silence filling, but about purpose, presence, peace. So if you find yourself constantly needing her attention to feel okay, if you feel like you vanish every time you're single, it's not a sign you need love. It's a sign you need healing. Because when a man learns to be whole on his own, he no longer seeks to be saved. He seeks to be seen, respected, met at his level. And that kind of man, he doesn't perform. He doesn't chase. He invites. And if love comes, it walks beside him, never ahead of him, never behind him, but with him. The most powerful place a man can stand from is this: I don't need a relationship to feel whole. I'm not afraid of silence. I know who I am. In the dark, without applause, without touch, without anyone watching. That kind of man is dangerous, but not in a way that hurts people, in a way that makes him unshakable, because you can't manipulate a man who isn't afraid to be alone. You can't pressure him with silence. You can't seduce him with attention. You can't guilt him into staying, just to avoid the discomfort of leaving. He doesn't choose from fear. He doesn't commit out of scarcity. He doesn't confuse chemistry with compatibility. He no longer asks, "Will she love me?" He asks, "Will loving her keep me anchored or make me drift?" Because he's no longer performing for approval. He's protecting his peace. He no longer needs constant validation to feel like a man. His masculinity is rooted deeply in who he is when no one's watching. He knows what he wants, what he'll tolerate, what he'll walk away from, even if it hurts. Because pain is nothing compared to regret. He's not bitter. He's just clear. He doesn't hate love. He just respects himself more than he ever has before. And here's what makes him even more rare. He doesn't chase potential anymore. He doesn't fall for a woman's someday. He watches her patterns. He listens to his body. He trusts his gut. Because he's seen what happens when a man betrays himself just to be loved. He's lived that chapter. He's read every painful page. And he's not interested in repeating it. This man doesn't demand perfection, but he will never again settle for confusion. If her words and actions don't align, he leaves. If her beauty masks manipulation, he leaves. If being with her costs him his center, he walks away, without a scene, without a speech, without resentment, because he knows what he's built alone. He knows the value of his peace, his mornings, his energy, his space, and no woman, no matter how captivating, is worth losing that foundation. This is the man who doesn't need to choose right, because he's already living right. And if someone enters his life, they're not completing a puzzle, they're joining a path. He's not looking for someone to save, or to save him. He's looking for someone who's also done the work, someone who doesn't need to be fixed, because she's already found herself too. And together, if it happens, they won't rush, they won't beg, they won't control. They'll simply walk, side by side, because they both know wholeness is not something you find in someone else. It's something you become, so that if love does arrive, you can meet it, not with need, but with strength. So after all this work, after all this healing, after learning how to sit with silence, how to choose peace over performance, how to become a man who stands on his own, what kind of love is even worth returning for? What kind of woman is worth opening that door again? The answer, surprisingly, is not grand. It's not romantic in the Hollywood sense. It doesn't sparkle with drama or flood you with adrenaline. It's quiet. It's steady. It feels safe. Because the only kind of love that's worth re-entering is the kind that doesn't require you to leave yourself at the door. She doesn't come to complete you. She doesn't ask you to shrink. She doesn't expect you to carry her emotional weight while setting down your own. She brings her own peace, her own path, her own rhythm. She respects solitude because she's made peace with her own. She doesn't chase. She doesn't cling. She chooses deliberately, not desperately. And when she meets you, she meets the man you've become, not the boy you once were. She doesn't fall for the performance. She connects with the essence. She doesn't want your perfection. She wants your truth. And in her presence, you don't feel pressure to impress. You feel freedom to be. That's how you know. This isn't rescue. It's resonance. She doesn't need your life to become her life. She's already built her own. She doesn't need your protection to feel safe. But she honors your strength when it's offered. She doesn't confuse drama with depth. She doesn't mistake silence for distance. She is grounded, like you, not perfect, but present. And together, you don't fill each other's holes. You expand each other's wholeness. You hold space for each other to stay individuals, even while building something shared. That kind of love doesn't demand that you choose it to feel like a man. It invites you to remain one while being in it. You don't chase it. You don't force it. You don't fear it. You let it unfold, and it only shows up when you've learned fully how to live without it. That's the paradox. You become most ready for love when you've stopped needing it to define you, when you've stopped asking someone to bring you peace, because you've already made peace your baseline, when your life is already full, and you simply have room for one more beautiful presence in it. That's the only kind of love worth re-entering. Not one that fills your void, but one that honors your strength. Not one that saves you, but one that sees you. Not one that needs you to change, but one that stands in awe of the man you've become. by doing the work alone. So if you're alone right now, and wondering if love will ever come again, maybe it will, maybe it won't. But what matters more is who you're becoming while you wait. And the truth is, if love does knock again, you won't answer it with desperation. You'll answer it with discernment. You'll look it in the eye and say, I don't need you to complete me, but if you're here to walk beside me, I've got room. And that is what a whole man says. If you're a man walking through singleness right now, don't rush out of it. Don't numb it. Don't resent it. Let it work on you. Let it heal you. Let it build you. Because what you build in solitude becomes the standard for every love you allow in after. And maybe that's the point. Maybe being single isn't a pause between relationships. Maybe it's the relationship you needed most. To meet yourself, to learn what you need, and to never again apologize for protecting it. So tell me, brother, what has being alone taught you? Leave a comment. Someone else may need to hear your truth.